Well, here we are in Chocowinity, North Carolina, and I'm have the pleasure and the honor of being with my friend and fellow combat veteran Jimmy Langley. And Jimmy, thank you so much for having us in your home and allowing us this time to be able to talk about your life and our life together in Vietnam. Jimmy and I served together a long time over there together, and we saw a lot of different things, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But first of all, I want to just start with the basics. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Pitt County and actually lived my life in Pitt County. Born 1948, May 9th, 1948.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about your folks. What were they doing at that time?
They were farmers. My dad was a farmer and my mother was a homemaker. Until just before I went in service, she got a job working for a automotive place delivering parts.
Okay.
And soon after, my father also started working at the same company.
Okay. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I do. I had two sisters, Frances, my other sister Nancy, and a brother that's passed, Alan.
Okay. And what was childhood like when you were growing up? Now you said county, right?
Right.
North Carolina? I mean, are we
Right.
talking about close to where we're at now?
Right. Within 15 miles.
Okay,
from where
so we're right here. We're at home.
Right.
Okay. So what was it like growing up in those days?
It was pretty much freedom type thing. We were children, and my mother and father both working, trying to keep us fed and keeping a garden. We lived out of the garden a lot. We lived in a house with no toilet, pumps for water, but it just seemed like to me it was more of a freedom type thing. We didn't have the rushes and the tight time limits and stuff on certain things, with the electronics that we have now, none of that was around. So we made do with whatever we found as children.
Oh yeah.
Hunting, fishing, frogging, just enjoying life and working with each other as a family to keep it going.
Oh yeah. Now, tell me about your high school days. What were they like?
I really wasn't into high school. I thought I was smarter than anybody else. And eventually, in the 11th grade, I dropped out and went to work for a shoe company.
Okay, what were you doing? Selling shoes or making shoes?
Hauling shoes around to different counties, to different stores.
Oh, you truck driver?
Stocking them. It was me and the owner of the company. He chose me to help get him around. He was an elderly guy, and I helped him move his stock.
Okay. And at that time, did you have any relationships going? Did you have a girlfriend, or?
I did.
Tell me a little bit about that.
That was my wife, who I'm married to now. We started dating in high school. We ended up married her before I went to Vietnam. We met in, I think, somewhere around 67, I think, when I met her in high school. And we started dating then, and eventually got married.
And then did you have any kids before you went to Vietnam?
No, we didn't have any kids.
Okay. Did you volunteer for the service, or did you get drafted?
I was drafted. Like I said, I was drafted. We got married on August the 3rd, and I was drafted and got my notice from Uncle Sam, which I still have, October 10th.
What in the world went through your mind?
Did this really happen? And it really was.
Yep.
I was nervous. I thought about it a lot, how I could get out of it, and I couldn't figure out a way, so I went with the program.
What did your new wife, what was her thinking on this whole thing?
I don't think she really had any. She never said anything except she was worried about me going to Vietnam. But other than that, it was like, we were young at the time, and we didn't have a lot of thoughts about what life was really all about. When you went to Vietnam, you started finding out what it was all about.
Well, I think you and I talked about this before. Before we got drafted, I never knew much about Vietnam.
I didn't.
I mean, I didn't. I guess it was on the news. I guess people were talking about it, but I wasn't involved in worrying about it or thinking, oh gosh, there's this Vietnam War. the first time I started to think about the Vietnam War is when I got a phone call from one of my buddies and one of my best friends, Eddie Testa, right after graduation day in high school, went down and joined the Marines. Day after high school. And I got a phone call. Eddie had went to the Marines, went to Vietnam, and after being there for 2 weeks, he got shot right between the eyes.
You know, John, that's kind of similar to what happened to me. I just had a friend that lived here, Donald Ray Arnold. He was joined the Marines also. And 2 weeks after I got to Vietnam, he got killed.
I mean, and then it was real. I still didn't know about Vietnam, but now it was like something is happening over there, right? And but I still didn't personalize it. It's not me. I'm not in it, right?
Right.
Until I got I started college because my dad wanted me to go to college, and I was burned out, and I didn't want to go to college, but in order to continue to live with him and so forth, he said, you need to continue your education, and I thought it was more important to make money and chase girls, and I don't know which order that would go in, but, and I didn't even tell my dad that I'd quit college, and he's the one that saw the letter when it came.
So he knew you would quit then.
And I'll tell you, that was a pretty tough conversation to have, and my dad I think he was disappointed in me, but I think he was more afraid.
That's my dad.
I think he was more fearful about what the possibility was. So where did you end up going to basic?
I went to basic at Fort Bragg.
And that's an infantry post.
Right.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about basic. What was it like?
It was just a lot of training, getting yourself, trying to build you up and build you into what they thought they needed for Vietnam. And, our exercising and training with different ways and different things, including the M14. That's why I ended up getting the expert rifleman M14 while I was there.
And I as well, when I was at Fort Ord, of course, we started with the M14s.
Right.
Even though Vietnam was well on its way. And, I've often looked back at that and thought, why hadn't they caught up? Why weren't we shooting M16s?
I think, John, it was because the M14 was a heavier rifle, and they wanted you to train with as much weight. Because the M16 is a third the weight of what
Tell
that
me
rifle
about
is.
it. Oh, yeah.
And so I think that's the reason. The more weight we can put on, the more...
that sounds funny, but I think you're right. So tell me about when the very first day. Now, did you bus up there to Fort Bragg, or how did they get you there?
Man, I was bust.
Okay. What happened when you got there and they opened the door and all you guys got out?
The first thing they started doing is screaming at the top of their voice to let us know who they were, the DIs. And from then on, it was screaming and hollering the entire 8 weeks.
Yep. Did you, at that moment, I remember very clearly they said, form up. And of course, a bunch of civilians, and half of them were from L.A., so they were thugs, gang members and thugs, and form up. What is that? And so nobody did anything, and that, of course, incited
more yelling.
Oh, that was terrible. And they brought out a trash can, and they said, we're going to give you one chance, and one chance only. You bring your weapons up, your drugs, and they started naming off things. And if you put it in that trash can, we're not going to say a word. Did you have anything at all like that?
Not that. Only when I left Vietnam, they did that.
Okay.
You had to check you out and make sure you didn't have any drugs.
So, and I was shocked. At the number of these guys that went up and put pistols. They had guns and knives, switchblade. I mean, I'm going, are you kidding me? You brought that to basic training? And so then the DI shakes the can. And he goes, I know that's not enough. And he goes, so this is the deal. I gave you your chance. He says, we're going to take you in here and we're going to strip you down. And if we find one pill, one little blade, one little letter opener, going to be the end of you. And the minute he said that, guys started to go up and throw stuff. I mean, that was a tough crew. And those guys, a lot of long hairs. Remember when you got your hair cut?
Right, I do.
Were you a long hair?
I wasn't.
Not.
My dad would not let me grow my hair long.
Yeah, but that hair cutting ceremony was pretty interesting with a bunch of these gang members and stuff. And so basic went along, you learned that, and then at the end of basic you graduated. Now, up to that point, you didn't have a clue what you might be doing in the Army, right?
I did not.
You got graduated and they gave you an MOS. What was it?
13 Alpha 10, which is artillery cannoneer.
Okay. And did they tell you that's what that meant?
Yes, when I left Fort Bragg to go to Fort Sill AIT, they let me know. That's
okay. What were your thoughts there?
Well, I thought, well, somewhere along the line, my dad must have had something to do with it because he was a cannoneer
Really?
and stayed in service 6 years as a crew chief.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And my dad, my first thought was, he's had something to do with this. He's contacted him and said, hey, put my son here, but it didn't work that way. I mean, that's what I thought.
Yeah, sure. And then what was AIT like for being in the artillery?
It was, well, at the time, it was cold when I went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, freezing cold. And we would switch off from loading ammo on trucks, and then the next day, week or the next couple of days, another guy would come in and switch out with you, and then he'd learn how to fire the cannons, and then he'd go back to loading trucks the next day. Well, what happened to me, I got pneumonia while I was out there, and they stuck me in the hospital for 2 weeks, which I lost 2 weeks of training. When I got out of that training, came back to the barracks, the sergeant in charge of those barracks didn't have a place for me at the time as a truck driver or on the team of they were training with. So he told me to hide out in the barracks, and this was later on in the last part of the AIT, and everything would be taken care of. And sure enough, it was. Wasn't a couple of weeks when I got out, they were getting ready to send me to Vietnam, and I had never fired a cannon in my life. My dad taught me more about the cannon than the military did because he could tell me about how to you crank the handles for the deflection and the elevation and
my
things. But I never got one iota of training with.
So you were the only guy probably that arrived in Vietnam as a cannoneer that
Exactly.
never pulled a lanyard.
Never pulled a lanyard. Never loaded, never thrown a round into the back of a cannon.
So
never cut
were
charges.
you a little concerned about that? I mean, did you think to yourself, I'm going over to Vietnam to be a cannoneer, and I honestly don't.
I really
haven't done
didn't.
that.
I thought the Army was going to take care of me. I thought they knew exactly what they were doing, and all I had to do is follow their instructions.
show up.
And show up, that's right.
Okay, graduate from AIT, they gave you a little time off.
They did, and they did that because the barracks next to us graduated a week before. They wouldn't give them any time. I told them they didn't have any time. They were going straight to Vietnam, and they went out. Everybody went AWOL, the whole entire barrack.
Oh my gosh.
So when they come to us, they said, "We're not going to have you guys doing this stuff. We're not going to have to go around and find out where you are."
Yeah.
So they give us. They said you'll have a week off before you. So we come home. I came home and spent a week home before I left.
Yep. When did you arrive in Vietnam?
I arrived in Vietnam March 10th, 1969.
Okay, and you flew in
Right.
to
Benoit.
Benoit. And tell me what your impression was when they opened the door and you.
I remember walking out and smelling feces burning. I didn't notice what it was. Diesel. I learned what it was later, but and the humidity. We talk about humidity here. It's nothing what Vietnam was.
Instant wet.
Wet. And we come out, you got to realize in March, just here, it's cold weather. We have not got into spring quite yet. And I was white as a sheet. All the pictures I took, it was like
like you were an albino.
Albino, right.
And you had blonde hair.
Right.
Just blonde hair.
Beach guy, look like a beach bum.
Exactly. So I know they trucked us over to Long Bend. You still didn't know where you were going.
Right.
Did you sit in the bleachers and
I
wait
did.
for your name to?
But we went through a 2 or 3 day training session or something that went through the bleachers before we moved from Benoit out into the field. I think it was 3 days. They even carried us, which I didn't understand why I was going into a tunnel rat type training thing, because I knew I wasn't going to be a tunnel rat. You know, I didn't think it would. And they carried us through all these tunnels that in Coochie, and you get down into feel what it was like, the humidity in those holes,
Oh.
and dark, and the smell, and to be honest with you,
Moldy
you couldn't hardly breathe.
insects.
Right, you try to suck in air, and the guys in front of you and behind you, because you go into the line, and I'm stuck in the middle. I got kind of claustrophobic anyway, but just smelling that inside of that thing and trying to breathe is like I didn't think I was going to get air enough in there. And I was glad when I finally saw that light in it. It wasn't a long tunnel, just short to get you through.
Oh yeah.
But
Yep.
enough I knew I didn't want to go in it.
Where did they assign you?
First of all, I was assigned to the 1st of the 8th Artillery. Supposedly leave there and go to the battery. Well, when I got there in Coochie, I found out that the guys, radio operators for Alpha and Bravo, Charlie, had been taken out. They were
So
killed.
the 1st and the 8th were at Coochie?
Right.
Okay.
And so they never went into the battery, never met anybody from the battery, the commander, anybody. I was given papers. Somebody walked out and handed me papers and told me I would be headed to either Alpha or Charlie Company, Wolfhounds. And my buddy, which was Abby Leeser at the time, he had a little problem with Alpha. Charlie Company said that had this intuition about it being bad luck, and I said, well, okay, you can take Alpha, I'll take Charlie. I don't think there's no difference in it. And so he went to Alpha Company, I went to Charlie.
Was your job supposed to be? I guess what was your job supposed to be when you went to Charlie?
Would have been a RTO for forward observer.
But you had never carried a radio.
Right.
You'd never keyed one up.
Never keyed one up. That's another story. Never handled a radio in my life. I never keyed one up. Didn't know anything about the codes and all this stuff. And when I got into, in fact, another radio operator there in, I think it was Jackson I went into. I'm not sure the first time. But his name, I was trying to think of the guy's name now. He got me straightened out about giving locations and not giving them by code. Like you had going out on an ambush. The first night I was out, first thing I done was keyed up a mic and told the whole world where y'all were going. And this guy keyed me out during the process, and he got through. He said, "Do you know what you just did?" No, I don't. He said, "You just give the location. You're supposed to use this code book to make sure these guys, it's known to the people that's going out and us, but not every VC
Sure.
chapter." But I learned fast.
Welcome to Vietnam.
All right.
That was
That
your
was right.
welcome. Yep. So you've got to feel kind of confused. You've got to, at this point, you're new, you don't know anybody.
Right.
Who was your first officer that you carried the radio for?
I can't remember the guy's name. That he wasn't. I didn't have him probably 2 weeks, and for some reason I can't remember his name.
Okay.
Yeah, he loses me. And the second one, I think, was Tommy Clack.
Okay.
And the third one was Ligon. And then I also had Languinet. I toted the radio for him when Tommy got hit. And I toted the radio for him for about 2 or 3 weeks.
And that was straight infantry. You were
Straight right.
that wasn't anything to do with our RTO.
Well, artillery, right. And see, the thing about the artillery being with the infantry, it was, you had first platoon, second, third, and fourth, and it kind of rotated so the guys didn't catch all of it. One got platoon all the time, which sometimes it worked out that way that it did. But with the artillery, we would go to one or the other. If I went today with the first platoon, I would go maybe the next day or skip a day and go with the second platoon or whatever right
Yep.
down the line. So I was with all the platoons whenever they needed something.
Yep.
Never had to go out all the time. And that's the reason I wasn't there in a lot of the situations where y'all were in, and I didn't sit. I was back at base camp. But with the artillery, like I said, it was rotating between all platoons.
Okay. And as a young RTO like that, forward observers, as I recall, sometimes got to fly in helicopters. And did you go with them in the helicopter?
I never did. Most of the time, if it was that was done, the FO went up on his own because he had his radio right there with him.
Gotcha. Okay. I always wondered about that.
No, I never went up and did any reconnaissance type thing like they did.
Okay. What can you tell me? What was the life of a radio operator like on a common day in Vietnam when they sent us out on a sweep through the rice paddies around Trang Bang or up there? And it was. Tell me what that was like.
I never thought it at the time as what the life was of a RTO, but I read statistics on it, and it was from what I've read, it was like one chance in a lifetime of getting out of it, not getting hit, but getting out of it. More guys got hit than didn't get hit. That's why there was continuous change in RTOs so regular. And that's all the infantry included, not just the artillery FOs, RTOs, but the infantry RTOs were they was just as vulnerable as anybody. You know, they would get the same thing, and that's because the guy with a radio on his back is a target. You know.
Okay. And if you had the whip antenna,
I had the whip antenna on it.
You're
I always unfold a fiberglass antenna when
pretty good target.
Yep, stick it up. Here I am. I hope I'm low enough.
When did you experience your first firefight?
That I cannot really say. I can remember different ones, but I can't remember when the first one was.
Tell me about one.
The first one I remember was an ambush we set up one night, and had two BC come through. We popped on them. One of them went into a hole. We didn't see any of it. We waited till the next morning. Everybody stayed low. They fired. Didn't see any more movement. Stayed in the next morning. Brought in a tracker team, 2 dogs, or a dog, a German Shepherd, to track him. And he tracked him. He wasn't 50 yards from where we popped on him.
Oh yeah.
And he'd gone in a hole. And one of the guys, I don't remember who he was, went down to the hole and saw him down in there. He was just barely breathing. And they fired down over the M16. You know, to make sure he was dead, I assume is what it was for.
Yeah.
And I was standing around, and they asked me, I had carried 2 hand grenades and 2 smoke grenades on my radio off the side, off of it. And they asked me to throw a grenade in the hole, and I threw one in, and we drug him out later. And I was trying to play this hero of a tough guy, don't nothing bother me. And I went down and drug him out by the hair of the head and took pictures of him. And when I drug him out, his head stretched like all the bones in his head was gone. And and his hair was coarse, real coarse hair.
Yep.
I'll never forget it, but I did it only to prove to the guys around me I'm not afraid of anything. And it really didn't make any difference, but it made something to me because I said, you know, they know I'm tough.
Yeah, yeah.
But I really won't get tough.
Yep, yep. You bet. Tell me about the time that you remember when you were out with the guys. When was the first time one of the guys either got shot, wounded, or killed?
First time, I want to say it was Waterloo. I'm not sure. He got, he was a radio operator and he got shot. That was out on a patrol one day and got sniper fire and stuff. And he got killed and got shot. I think, if I ain't mistaken, got shot right through the radio.
And then they ended up naming a hard spot after.
After him, right.
After
they later changed it though, didn't they?
Yeah, they later changed it.
Cortex or something like that.
Kotrick.
Kotrick. Okay.
Yep, yep. So you were there. You saw this. I mean, you were a witness to this fight and this guy getting killed. What did you think?
To be honest with you, at the time, I didn't know what to think. You know, you don't experience that every day in the real world. You know, people dying all around you and people just trying to get to know him. By the time you get to know him, he's gone. You know.
It's kind of a shocking, numb feeling, though, isn't it?
It is.
Well, especially when you actually realize that guy's dead. I mean, it's not like
And-
he's going home to.
And especially when you hear the guys around, I didn't actually hear it myself or see him falling, but the guy next to him said that he said as he was falling, as Waterloo fell, he said he looked up at him and looked him in the eyes and said, "I'm dying," and that was his last word. And you know, things like that you don't ever forget.
Yeah. Artillery, it was a very, very common thing, especially when we were at Jackson and when we were at Crockett too. They would shoot what they called H&I, which is
Yeah,
harassment and interdictment.
right.
And that meant that all night long,
Right.
that battery would just shoot in a grid somewhere.
Right.
Were you, at that point, would you be with the guns, being the RTO?
Never went with the gun. Still out in the field. I would be beside or around the person that called it in. Because Ronnie did it a lot of times. He'd call it in, and like I said, when he says fire for effect,
Yes.
and then he says continue fire until we say stop, and it go all night long.
Oh, I mean, that was.
Boom, 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 boom,
Yep.
boom, boom.
And
Did you ever have a point where the radio didn't work? And how did you deal with it if you had technical difficulties?
You didn't. You just let everybody know your radio wasn't working, and you had to depend on other people's radio around you within a certain length. It only happened once or twice with me. You always carried another radio. I mean, another battery. The battery was it was for PLC 25, and it had a battery about yay long, yay thick, and you carried a second battery. That's the only thing we had to do to correct.
what did they weigh?
The radio itself, I think, weighed 26 or 7 pounds, and then plus the battery, I think it was something like 3 pounds. Then plus the whole compact thing with everything on it probably weighed 80 pounds.
Yeah, the ruck.
Right.
The frame. Yep. So after one of these nights of constant H&I, I remember that you and I had to go out on a mission together, and the lieutenant came over to the second platoon and asked the lieutenant if he could borrow us to go with him to check the grid.
I already know what you.
And he was so convinced that there was bodies laying
Right.
all around. Tell me what you remember about that day.
We went out and went in the area where they called in artillery that night and called it in, like I said, all night long. And they wanted body counts. They wanted to know if anything was hitting that area, so that's when we had to go out. And when we got out there, we found how they did it. I'll never know, but they had got some of the bodies and had buried them. And there was 3 or 4 graves, I don't remember exactly. And they were piled a little bit high on the dirt wise, and when they called back, they wanted to know how many bodies was there. Well, they didn't know there's 3 graves or 4 graves, and they said, we want to know body count, dig them up. So they started digging graves to find out, and I was offered a chance to dig a while, so I took a little short tool and was chewing gum and throwing dirt, and all of a sudden when I went down with the shovel, there was a body under there that was swollen, and I hit it with the shovel, and the gases came out of it. I'll never forget it. Big smell in this world. And the people around says, "Hey, this is not right." Who called it back? Said, "Look, we're not digging these bodies up. We tell them there's 6 bodies in there." And so they called back and they said, "There's 6 bodies in these 3 graves," and that's how they got the body count for that.
Yep. But the lieutenant that actually was in charge of that mission was absolutely freaking out, as I recall, because we didn't see a whole bunch of bodies laying out in the field.
Right.
And I still to this day believe that he thought if he could come back with a big body count thing, he could punch a ticket. And
That's what he was trying. He was trying to do. I know him. I was his RTO, so I know he was trying that. He practically told me that's what he was trying to do.
yeah, and of course you were there. Russ Bruns and I were the first 2 that they told to dig the graves up, and we dug.
I know that's right. Somebody was digging ahead of what.
We dug up 2 of them, and I knew when we started it was wrong. You know, being born and raised a Catholic, a good Catholic boy, and I mean this was desecration, right? I mean this was just not right. and that lieutenant just kept I'm
Right.
giving you an order,
Right,
you know.
right.
And Bruns was kind of he just said, let's do it. And so then, you know, and I'll never forget, because when we unearthed the thing, there was 2 slats of wood over the top, and then that butted up against each other. And when we took those off, of course, there's the guy, and there was a little teapot and a little bowl of rice.
Right. That was the first 2 graves I think y'all dug up
That was-
before.
that was
and they
all.
wanted to get the 3rd grave or 4th grave, whatever.
And
That's
we,
when,
well, after the second
Yeah.
one, he said, go over and do that one. And I looked up at him and I said, we're not going to do it
I
anymore.
know somebody said it. I
I'm
don't
not,
remember
we're
what it
not,
was.
we're not going to do it anymore. And he goes, I'm giving you a direct order. And I said, I don't care. Now, the amazing part about this is all the guys are just standing around watching. Remember that?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there was nothing, and guys are going, this isn't right. What are you, you know, what are you making us do here? And that's when he turned and said, Jimmy,
That's exactly right. That's right.
It's your
That's
turn.
right.
And I thought, oh man, don't make him do that.
Yeah, he said because they had stopped. That's when.
Oh,
That's right.
We just said we're not going to do it, and he turned and he goes, "Jimmy, it's your turn." And you didn't want to. I mean, that's nothing a guy wants
Oh
to,
no.
you know, go over and do. And so
That's
when
right.
we quit digging, I looked at Bruns, and I said, even God won't be able to forgive us for this. And I never said another word. About 35 years later, Russ Bruns is standing in my kitchen at Great Falls, Montana. They used to come from Illinois every year, camping in Montana, and they'd always spend a couple of days with us. And it was always hard when they left, you know, because Russ and I were so close, and, you know, the emotion of him leaving.
Right.
And so on this one particular occasion, we were standing in the kitchen, and I was going to give him a hug, and he started crying. And this is not like him. And I said, buddy, what's wrong? And he said, do you have any idea what you did to me? And of course, what am I going to, what? What do you mean what I did? He said, I've had to go years of counseling, because he said, when you looked at me at that grave and said, even God can't forgive us for this, he said, I took that in my soul. And you know what I felt like? I can't even tell you what I felt like. It was so horrible. Because it was just something I said, it was how I was feeling. And yet, he received it as God is never going to be able to forgive us. But, you know, digging up graves, Jimmy, is just about as bad a deal as what happened in Vietnam. And by the way, we weren't the only ones that did that. That was pretty common. You know, they were digging graves up all the time, looking for ammunition and weapons and
Right,
stuff
right.
like that. But, yep, and that lieutenant, I don't know whatever got into him, but he was bound and determined. You know, he was going to...
Well, he was. I don't know what I call him gung ho. He was the type of guy that he was military, and he wanted. I mean, everybody to look at him like he was it. And he was a ranger on top of that. So.
Yep. Of all the things that you experienced in Vietnam, what was the worst day in Vietnam for you? The worst day of your life in Vietnam?
The worst day I have to say was when Tommy Clapp stepped on the 105.
Mhm.
It had to be the worst day.
And who was Tommy Clack to you?
He was my FO. He was the forward observer artillery for the whole Charlie Company.
And he had just gotten his captain's stripes. He hadn't even pinned them. I don't think he'd even pinned them on yet.
He hadn't, because he told me he didn't get them until after he was in the hospital.
Yeah. So he had just been promoted to captain. And of course that, Jimmy and I, honest to God, we were never the same after that, because we were just so close, and we saw such a horrible mess. And, you know, I remember when we put him on the helicopter, the crew chief said, I'll take care of him now, and we knelt down because we wanted the chopper to go. We didn't want
Right.
to have him wait for us to crawl out from underneath the blades. And I remember saying a prayer. I said, God, if you're for real, don't let this man make it. And the reason is remember that 8x10 photo he always showed us of his new wife
You know, John, to be honest with you, I never saw that particular picture. I did see a small one, I think, before, but he
But
was always
she was
show-
gorgeous.
he was always showing you different guys around.
Oh, I mean, she was a blonde bombshell. And so in my mind, this is weird how a guy's mind works. All I could think of is she's going to be home. If he makes it, he's going to go home like this. She's not going to. How is she going to accept this, right? And I
Right.
said, it's just going to be a mess. So in my mind, because he was so messed up, I just go, if you're for real, don't let him make it.
Yeah.
Just let him go. So now you understand why, when I found you, and you said, did you find Johnny Clack? I immediately said, no, he's dead. And you said, I don't think so. You know what? The hair on the back of my neck stood up because all this came back.
Yeah, I remember that.
I
man.
had not even thought about it until that very instant. And then I went, oh my God, what would I say to the man?
That's the reason I couldn't call him.
And so, and
Took me a while.
I said, I'll try. And you said, well, let me know,
Right.
And I found, with the way I was finding guys in those days,
And,
The
and,
meth-
and he was injured pretty bad. Is that what happened?
He had his leg blown, both legs blown off. I don't remember.
arm and shoulder.
Up above the knee, this arm and shoulder was gone. And I remember him when he was laying on the ground. I was trying to get him in a position to get him on. We were trying to load him onto the
Well, we actually,
Stretcher.
all it took was a poncho.
right a roll-out poncho type thing.
I mean, there wasn't that much.
you know,
He wasn't
but
that
we
heavy,
tried to
I
lift
think.
him, find a place to lift him at, to put him on the stretcher, and without hurting him, that like it could hurt him anymore. But he was complaining about his arm being underneath him,
Yep.
and he kept screaming out. And
Can
he
you
was
get me off
cursing,
my arm?
like, get me off my GD arm, and like I said, that that particular picture would always be there.
Mm-hmm.
Never have I felt more helpless.
I was going to ask how did you two guys, because you were there, how do you keep it together in such a trauma situation?
Oh, you just operate
Are
on
you
au-
just in shock,
you're just
or
on
you
auto.
just in-
Well,
You just
well,
just
and
move.
Jimmy'd been actually knocked back. I mean, he'd been knocked off his feet, and when he came crawling up there, I mean, you were stunned to begin with.
Yeah.
And I crawled over. I mean, I was scared to walk. I mean, because I knew what had happened just the day before. Remember when?
Well, you just gone through the
I
same
mean, I
thing.
just went through it, and when I got there, all I could see is the whites of his eyes. Everything else was black from gunpowder and cordite and everything, and that's when we were there, and he says, I'm on my arm. Can you get me off my arm? And Doc, took a while for Doc to get over there. There was really no need to put tourniquets on his stumps.
That's right. They were burned. They were
They
cauterized.
They were cauterized, and all you could see was all the little
Ligaments. That's right. Put
just
dirt
twi-
attached to
twi-
it. Root.
twitching all over, and for him to be alive, that's what. I couldn't believe he was alive.
He tried to sit up himself. He pulled himself up like this. When he pulled himself up, and his face and all the way it was burned with the powder and every muscle and every ligament in his legs were pulled back up into his body as he pulled his body up, and you could see the dirt and the trash and stuff in it. And then he was begging for help, and you were saying, "How do I help you?"
And you
Yeah.
know what's funny is that do you know what happened after you guys put him on the chopper?
No. They told us, sent word back out in the field he was still alive, is what we were told. And from there on, we kept questioning, everybody did.
They
And
left him for dead.
Yeah, they did.
Yep.
They left him
They
for
put
dead.
him on a pile of dead bodies.
Right.
And he claimed that he had like 7 out of body
Body experience.
experiences. Yeah, unreal.
Yep.
Well, and you asked earlier, how did we operate? You operate on auto. I mean, you
don't even know it.
You don't even think.
Yeah. It's like you know what's right to do, and you work in that direction.
And that's
But in boot camp, they didn't train you to put a guy in a poncho liner.
Oh no.
I mean, you know.
nothing prepares you for that.
They did a dummy or something like that, you know, but that's not the same.
Nothing prepares you.
Yeah.
Nothing.
You got to rub a dummy.
After that day, like you said earlier, you said we were just hoping to get a day off or a rest.
Oh.
What happened after you guys put him on the chopper? Do you remember?
Oh, they back to business as
Right,
usual.
back to next, same thing.
I mean, the next day they put us on choppers and sent us out someplace on an Eagle flight and dumped us off and had us go sweep a village. There was, in my mind, I thought we should have gotten a break. I mean, because we
Right.
were we were emotionally messed up. But the Army, that's another day. That's just another day of work, right? And they just put us on choppers and sent us back out and had us go through a village.
Have you ever heard of anybody talk about when in life when we go through trauma, how sometimes we can re-edit memories? Have you ever heard of that process before?
I haven't, but I believe it's possible.
Yeah. So because with Tommy, this is an emotional. You were brave enough to let us see some emotion, which is natural. The good news about his story is it didn't end for him that way. And he talks at the reunion. He talked about how God had a bigger plan, and in our minds, if we stay on that day and think, man, that was the end of the rope. Thank God it wasn't for him. And that,
Well, he has
got
a
to
phenomenal story.
and you get to re-edit. Yeah, you get
For
to
somebody
see
to
that.
come back and then be a service officer for
I
how
want
many
to ask
30 some years.
I ask myself how he does it, or you question yourself how does he go through ordinary life?
I do it all. I ask myself that all the time.
Yeah.
And you've been with him in the
Right.
van, and I've been with him in the van, and there is like no other experience in the world
None.
than to see this
None.
guy strap that arm on.
That's right.
How do you deal with that though? You talked about that almost nightmare.
Almost.
But now even today we're
You learn to
over-
block it out.
so
You get to the point when you in Vietnam. I think everybody learned to block out. There was nothing. It was just like John said, auto mode. You just function.
Yeah.
And anything like that, you get it out of your mind. You don't dwell on it. You move on to the next one because the next day something's going to happen again, or maybe another person. And then what do you do then? You're going to hold that, and so you just keep putting them aside. And when I left Vietnam, I left to forget it, everything about it. And even now, when I think about it, I call myself tough, and I think a lot of times that hey, I can handle this, but then it gets to the point that you give it up sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any particular buddies over there that you remember that you were closer to than others?
The one, like I said, was Abby Leesville. We went through basic training together and went through AIT together. And he didn't think I was going to Vietnam because of the 2 weeks I was in the hospital at Fort Sill.
Oh yeah.
And we went together. We had the same ride there. And when we got there, everything we did was the same until we separated. He went to Alpha and I went to Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
And
Now,
then,
the unique position you had is you knew a lot of us. You knew a lot of us, but you were going around. I mean, you were different places.
like,
So there wasn't really that opportunity to have a bunker buddy, for instance.
I
or-
actually bunkered by myself, believe it or not. Even never bunkered with Tommy, except in a situation where all radios were in the
Yes,
same
yes.
area. I always had a little small bunker. I'd find the smallest hole I could find outside. Sometimes it would be a attached
Sure.
sandbag.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I was trying to think the one out around Cambodia that was set up Diamond. I remember it was some scout had a little place off the side of another bunker where 3 guys were bunking, And it seemed like I always ended up in one single by myself. I wanted to be by myself, you know. I guess everybody did to a certain extent. And so I always filled the sandbags out and made a little corner that I could crawl in and write home or write letters or whatever.
Yep, yep. Did you get an R&R while you were there?
I did.
And tell me about that.
We had planned and talked about it over the few months I was in Vietnam about going to Hawaii. My wife, Diane, and my buddy Abby and his wife, Zondra Haywood, she was planning, and he was planning on to go with us to Hawaii. Well, he ended up getting killed, and we ended up going by ourselves.
Now, this is not a, I don't even know if this is an appropriate question. But you had all that planned, and then this happens. Did that throw you off your game?
It throws you off because it's you know, that's your close buddy, and
I'm just
you know,
gonna say.
And you're thinking about now all these plans. Just we're gonna get a break together. I was trying to help him. He had a lot of insight to something happening to him. I don't understand where it come from, but he always knew he was gonna die in Vietnam, and he kept saying it. And I kept trying to talk him out of believing that, but it never. Until the day he died, he was right. You know, it was like, hey, he knew what, he had a feeling he knew it was there. He said, I know I'm not going to make it out of Vietnam. And he asked me to tell his wife, he said, if you get out, promise me you'll tell her this. And said, if anything happens to you, I'll tell Diane the same thing. I'll tell her exactly what I asked you to tell my wife, I'll tell your wife. And I never got in contact with her until 45 years after the fact. I called her and I couldn't talk to her on the phone.
Oh my goodness. 35 years.
Yes.
She answered the phone.
Right.
And you were your throat was closed.
All I could see is Abby, and I tried to explain to her what he said. I got part of it out, and I told her, I said, I'm sorry that I can't talk to you like I need to talk to you. And she understood, and I asked her about computers, if she was use computers and all. She doesn't use any kind of a new electronics thing, so there's no way I could get up with it except by telephone. And I promised that I'd call her back and never did. But I still have the phone number, believe it or not, and I almost called her the other day.
You know, it's just, if somebody hasn't experienced that, you can't explain it. There's just no way.
That's right.
There's just no way to explain it. And you know, she was probably like sitting there, and she was probably like, "Oh my gosh, you know, you called."
Right.
And you know, it probably meant a lot to her. You know,
I think it did.
Even though you couldn't complete the mission.
Right.
But still, just the thought that somebody.
She never remarried either. All those years.
That was with her husband.
Yeah.
Yep. And you know, I found that, and after we started the project of finding the guys and stuff, well, I'd find the families of our KIAs, and they, to a person, the first thing they'd say is, "Do you know what happened? Do you know what happened to him?" Well, they didn't tell you? No. They sent him a letter.
Right.
This is an insult, by the way. They sent him a letter with the date of death, and then they put the Vietnamese province in Vietnamese.
I didn't know that.
Oh, insult to injury? I think. Why would they put Vietnamese on somebody's notice, you know, the telegram that tells them that the guy got killed? And then there was 5 categories: automatic weapons fire,
Explosion,
concussion or explosion, projectile, you know,
right.
Gunshot or whatever. But 5, you got put in.
That's what happened to him also.
And that is all the information they gave him.
Right. And she
so,
knew, right.
And
they
so,
don't say how it happened.
Nothing.
They do tell you the area it happened in.
The province.
Right. That's
in
it.
The Vietnamese province.
Right.
And so these family members, all they want to know, I mean, they obviously, this is like 30 years later, all they want to know is was anybody there with him? Was somebody there with him when he died? How did he die? And of course, I've had to, because of the nature of the way some of the guys died, I had to not tell them,
Right.
you know, everything. But I always was as honest with them as I possibly could be, about the circumstances. And of course, I always made sure that they understood that their husband or their son did not die for nothing. It was he was there, he was serving his country, and we all did the best we could. And you know what? Your son made the ultimate sacrifice. But I always tell him he was a hero. He went. A lot of us went down fighting, right?
All right.
And I mean, that's better than some of those people back in the rear that had to tell the loved ones he shot himself up and
To
overdosed.
get out. That's true. It happened too.
I mean, honestly.
I remember a particular guy shooting his. It was a cook shooting himself through the hand to get palm of the hand, trying to get out of
Yep.
Vietnam.
Did you get wounded at all when you
I
were?
didn't, and I look at it this way. I'm really glad I didn't. Not enough that you say, well, a scratch here.
Oh. Well, all of us got a little frag here and there or
Yeah,
something,
right.
but the medic would just patch up and that'd be the end of
Right. In fact, when the thing that happened with Tommy Clark, if you were walking or able to move, you were mobile. It didn't make any difference if you had I didn't have, but if you had a wound, the number one priority was Tommy.
it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You do what you have to for him, and then we'll take care of the guy that's mobile.
Were you awarded any awards or citations?
I was.
What?
Uh,
Share with us what those were.
All the Vietnam medals you got with that, and the commendation medals, and the Bronze Star. And I received the Bronze Star 1.5 years after I got out of service. But I received it actually paper-wise the same day that I was promoted to 13E40, which was a recon. And that coincided with the promotion. I didn't know that until my paperwork and got going through it.
You and I talked a long time ago about the CIB. Did you get awarded a CIB?
No, I didn't.
Okay. I've been given information since that conversation that people are eligible for the CIB if they were with us. And they actually were in combat. So, not for the purpose of this interview, but after we're done, I will investigate that, because you were just as much a combat veteran as I was, as anybody that was out there was.
Only thing I was and did was I knew how. That's the reason when I went in from artillery, my dad and I, and on weekends we get out and shoot target practice. I knew how to handle a weapon, and I knew I was safe if I was with guys that could handle a weapon.
Yep.
And so that's the reason when they did my commander from the battery, which I had changed over to 177, they did come up and tell me that you are eligible to go back to the battery. And I said, I don't know any of you guys. I've never fired a cannon whatsoever.
You might hurt yourself or someone
Or
else.
someone else. That's true. But it's funny, John. But doesn't it make sense why they'd have a guy like me there to not train him? I know it happened a lot, not just me, lots of
But
guys.
I know, but just to hear you say that, I know you're right. I mean, it was nuts. I don't know how else to say it.
And you got, like you said, new guys coming in. I'm coming into a place and these guys saying, what does he know?
Yes.
Well, he's artillery. Well, does he really know artillery? I mean, you don't ask those questions, but you should.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. Actually, you're absolutely right. When you left Vietnam, did you have any more time to serve?
I did.
And where did you go?
Went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Right back to the old cannon cranking.
Right back to the hospital. That's right.
And what did you do there?
I met a guy coming from Vietnam, also came from Vietnam, was going back to Fort Sill, a sergeant. And they needed, at night they had a place to sit up. They had what was it called? I was a CQ runner anyway because of my rank.
Like an orderly room type
Right.
deal?
It was out in a tent out in the Fort Sill, Oklahoma, up in the mountains. And we'd go in 12 on, 48 off, and I was with a guy called Larry Sisson that he was in charge, and he needed a runner, and that's another good thing that worked out because my paperwork never got through to show that I was an E5 at the time.
Isn't that something?
I was considered an E4, so I was able to be his CQ runner because you couldn't have two.
Right.
So my entire time was spent after that. Her and his wife, my wife and his wife, stayed together at night sometime because being in a new area. And all
Oh
this
yeah,
stuff.
sure.
And so that's the way my last few months went at Fort Sill before I got out.
When you got out, what did you pursue as a career or a job, or tell me how that looked after you got out?
I started looking into the higher pay and the more education than I had. I hadn't finished high school. I decided I'd try to do some kind of a trade that paid pretty good. I found out machining was part of it, but you needed a high school education, which I didn't have. But I kept working at it, and in fact, I went through OJT from the government. When I got out, they paid me to train as a machinist.
Oh wow.
And I went through it. What it did as you worked so many months, and then your salary, they would give you a raise to match what it would be making in 4 years. So I went through 4 years of machinist training before I left, and went into another company that I started working in tool and die and machining.
Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy it? Or was that a good job? Did
It was good. The thing that saved me is technology. I talk about technology, but calculators used to, everybody had to sit down with a pencil and paper and do the figures, but now they got formulas. If you know the formula, you can sit down with a calculator, and if you can make the crank on the machine or dial it in,
Whip it out.
Whip it out. So my education part, as long as I learned how to do that, I could handle it, and that's what I did.
Mm-hmm. When did you start having a family?
Right at Fort Sill, before I left Fort Sill. My wife, Diane, got pregnant the last month I was there, and she left early to come home because she was having complications. Flew in, and I stayed there another month, and she come back home and went in bed rest right to start with.
Okay. Now, did you stay in touch with anybody when you came home?
I did not.
When was the first time that you were put in contact with anybody that you'd served with?
I think it was you, John, to be honest. I don't think it was you or Joe Wascom. I can't remember. One of it, I contacted me about something, but it was you or Joe, one of the other.
One of the things that amazed me about you when I first found you is the amount of pictures that you had.
That was one thing I did do.
You and see, what people don't realize is a picture is worth 1,000 words. And when I started seeing your pictures, all kinds of stuff came back. Right?
You're right.
I mean,
Still does to me today, even now I see somebody else's pictures. And
I mean, it just, and I'm sitting here going, I was there. I remember that. I mean, it was amazing, the pictures that. I mean, I thought that was like a treasure, to be able to have. That you saved all that stuff and kept that. You had mentioned that when you were in Vietnam, you felt the safest when you were by yourself, or you had your own little space. Right?
Right.
That's how you wanted to have it. When you came home, did that ever carry over in your life as throughout your life? Did you ever feel that you needed to have a place that was alone, safe, and so forth? Did that ever happen?
I did, and it continued for about a couple years, I think, maybe 3 years. And I was working, at the time I was working for a NATCO material handling a forklift company, and we worked 40 hours, 4 days, 10-hour shifts, days. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, depending on how I had my stuff packed, she would put me out on the river, Tar River, runs this way, with a backpack and a tent. And I'd take off and I'd stay gone, a couple of days, and she'd pick me up on Sunday. And I'd go back to work. And that didn't happen every week, but it happened sometimes twice a month or so. You know.
Diane, did you want to put him on the river and send him down the river?
Tell the truth.
Sometimes.
Set you free.
What? Why? What was the reason?
Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you.
We've all been no. We've all been through that, right? No,
Right.
You're the exception to the rule. You stayed married.
Yeah.
Do you know how many Vietnam vets never could figure out how to do it right? No kidding. I mean, look at me. Third time was the charm. You know, so no, there's nothing you can say that is going to be a surprise to anybody.
But what has made it happen is because she saw it enough to back off and let me have my space.
Yep. Did you come home having nightmares and
did.
and flashbacks
I
and
did.
so forth? And your family just doesn't know how. I mean, you can't tell them.
You could, I mean, how are they going to understand it? You know,
And I guess the reason I asked you about that, you know, being a loner and so forth, is because you shared with me, you know, when you found me that, you know, you spent a lot of time in the woods, you spent a lot of time deer stand hunting, and so forth. And I immediately started relating that to the fact that you were receding, you were alone, you didn't want to, you know, you were most comfortable.
right.
And I think, would you say that's
Yeah,
true?
that's true. And anybody you talk to that knows me will tell you it is true.
Yeah.
And you know, and I ain't saying I wanted it to be that way. I just felt like I needed,
Yep.
and that's what kept my
Yep.
sanity. If I am sane, I
Well,
don't.
and that's what's so hard to explain to people. People just, it's almost impossible because they can't be inside your head. They don't know what you feel like. You don't know what that anxiety, you know, anxiety's the worst.
Worse. Yep.
You know, so, well, bless your heart, Diane. I don't know how you stuck in there. Did you drink?
I did. That's another thing. That's the reason she loved, and I even carry it with me when I left backpacking. It would be with me when I left. Sometimes I can remember times I've been on the river and sitting by a fire I built and reminiscing or thinking or whatever you want to call it about different things. Some about Vietnam, some about life in general, and look down and seeing a water moccasin coming up. Now it would kind of make you have a different attitude, but. I was by myself. Anything happened, I was on my own.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any battle or any incident that happened in Vietnam that was significant in your tour over there that I haven't mentioned?
I don't think so, John. It's been hard actually to bring some of it back, you know, because I pushed it so far back. Some of it took me a while. I was all of a sudden. In fact, the first reunion I went to and talking to different people, some of it popped right back in place like I thought I had got rid of it, and it really won't gone. You think, hey, I don't remember that, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, you know. Yeah. But
like the time you're in a rice paddy and you're so heavy you can't get out, and somebody takes your M16 and pulls you.
right, push you out. Right.
Kind of things like that.
Sink up, suck in mud up to here, and your head sticking up and looking for a hand. But it's kind of weird. I got a picture of like this. This guy's pulling me out of a mud. In fact, it's Lieutenant Langley, Captain Langley. He pulled me out with the barrel pointing straight at him. I don't think I'd have reached for a gun like that.
Yeah, there was nothing like getting stuck in a rice. Nothing. That was so the mud. You couldn't move.
That place out there is closest to Vietnam, or other side you ever see. If you would get out and try to go through that thing, that's what we walk through every day. Places just like it's across the.
Oh yeah. By the way, do you ever do that just to go back to the day?
I do. I go back once in a while. I get out. And, I don't do it for that though.
I'm just just to relive the.
No.
On a more serious note, what has your wife meant to you all these years?
It's got to have meant everything, including my life, because Without her, I wouldn't be here.
Plain and simple. Fact of life. She saved you.
Right. She don't know it that much either.
Oh, you know what? I think she does. You know, it's funny how a wife that goes through living with a Vietnam vet, you know, they know a lot more than we think they know.
Yeah, I
know,
guess it is.
And you know, the thing I think, Jimmy, is that if it wasn't that she loved you with all of her heart, she'd have sent you down the river and
I know this.
wouldn't have had you come back.
I know this. Right. Not pick me up. There would be no pickup point. I understand that.
So, yep, that's a fact. And you
But
know,
it wasn't just her. You got to realize I had 2 kids at the same time too,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they had to go through a lot. And especially with my heavy drinking, I was a heavy drinker. I mean, heavy.
And you had 2 daughters?
A son and a daughter.
Oh, a son and a daughter. Okay.
Right.
So, do you think their childhood was affected by that?
They knew when I said something or asked them to do something, it wasn't waiting to find out they could do it later. They went ahead and did it because they knew my attitude about it and what I thought. I don't ask you to do much. When I do, I want it done. And they've told me that several times. That they actually, my daughter has, and my son said it wasn't so much we feared you. It's just that we knew you meant what you were saying, and if something was going to happen if we didn't make something go right, do it like it's supposed to be done.
Do you think there was, from their perspective, do you think they didn't have their dad around as much as they wanted because you would go and...
I think they kind of were like my wife. They kind of enjoyed the break because I was pretty strict on what I wanted done.
Okay.
And I didn't let them have the life that a lot of people do. They wanted to be out, go out with friends and stuff. They could go out, but it wasn't going to be every weekend thing. I made sure that because I didn't have an education, I stayed on them all the time about learning everything you can, because that's what's going to get you through life.
And you know, both you and I have so much in common as far as our Vietnam experience and our lives and everything. There was a certain point where you came out of your shell. And I think your family recognized it. All of a sudden you weren't so withdrawn and you weren't, your attitude changed about things and so forth. And I think that probably was a very good thing for your family, don't you think?
It is. I think it hasn't been that long ago either. So it's all. They're pretty proud of the change and that I can handle it better than I used to.
Yes.
And that ain't saying much.
No, but it is, Jimmy. It really is. You know, you have come a long, long way, my friend. A long, long way. What is your definition of a hero?
To me, I think it's more of the people that wasn't recognized as a hero than it is as a hero. There were so many of them that actually, especially in Vietnam, that are done things, died from it, and never even got recognized. So I feel like those that are heroes and alive, it's just not the same type of hero. It's the heroes that are not recognized that I think are more than the heroes.
Boy, and in Vietnam that happened a lot.
Right.
I mean, I can't believe how many heroic things were done and never recognized. Never. I mean, they never got recognized.
That's the sad thing about it. Those guys, and some of the names on the wall, lots of the names on the wall that never got recognized, but the names are up there.
Yeah.
But they never got anything to show for it.
Jimmy, what does the American flag mean to you?
It means the beginning of America to me. And what we should have been and still should be is where the flag started, where everything started. Our forefathers and everything that fought for the flag. That's what the flag means to me.
Now, you've got 2 children.
Right?
How many grandkids?
2 grandkids,
Okay. What are their names?
Marshall and Lindsay.
Okay. Now, you know I've told you this. This interview is going to be on our website, and I'm going to figure out some way to have this published so it'll be up there for 100 years.
It's a lot of years.
Okay. The reason is because I want your grandbabies to be able to have access to this. I want their children to know about their great grandfather. I want their children. It's almost like Ancestry.com in living color.
Right.
You know, and so somebody, I have no idea what technology is going to look like, but everybody's interested in family trees now. You know, Ancestry.com and all
Right,
this kind of
that's
stuff.
true.
Somebody 50 years from now is going to be monkeying around and trying to figure out who you were and so forth, and they'll run across this. I want you to look into the camera right now, and I want you to tell your grandchildren and the generations that come after that, I want you to give them your best advice.
To be strong, to be respectful. You know what's right and wrong, and follow that, and it'll get you through.
You want to tell them you love them?
Oh, I love them. They know that. Marshall, Lindsay.
Yeah, and the grandkids or the great grandkids that I don't even
Right.
know yet.
They haven't come yet that Lindsay's thinking about.
Yeah. Oh, bless your heart. Jimmy, I can't thank you enough. Is there anything I haven't covered?
I don't think so, John.
You know, and the reason I say that is this is your story. And all I want to do is just try to facilitate a little bit. But if I've forgotten something, if there's something else you want to add, please feel free.
Well, one thing I'd like to add is I know this is already doing things that people don't realize the feminine of each individual, because my son has he's gone through some of these stories that Tim's filmed, and he said I could have told the story of something that, like Tommy says it one way, I say it one way, you tell things, and he says he can actually understand it better than going through all these guys he's looking at.
Different points of
right.
view.
So that, to me, that already says what this is doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proud to be part of it.
Oh,
Did,
and we're
did you, did you remember the ride home? You didn't ask that question. The airplane ride home when you left. Do you remember, did you take a commercial jet or a military jet?
Commercial.
Was it like United?
America.
And then, do you remember the stewardesses? Were they young or were they old?
They were young, and
They were very energetic.
Right.
And they were very happy, and it was almost like a party going home. Is that correct?
and I remember sitting on the runway before that jet took off. Everything was totally quiet. You couldn't hear it's like the breathing couldn't even. And when it got up in the air, you heard the biggest cheer you ever seen or heard in your life. They just, it was.
everybody came undone.
Right.
And they gave you steak dinners on the way home?
Oh, they treated us right.
Right. It's just amazing to me because, well, it's a long trip home too. You got to realize that from Vietnam, it's another day. You're arriving another day. The day I left Vietnam is the day I got to Vietnam, and the day I left Vietnam to come home is the day I got home. But it's 24 hours later, and we come back through Anchorage, Alaska, and landed there, and so, there's different ways people come, and then into Oakland, California.
When you came home, you came through Oakland,
Right.
and were you dishonored at all, or were you ridiculed or harassed even when you got back here?
No, I never was, but one reason is guys were getting out of the uniform, and some of them came in fatigues, but when they got there, they had been told that make it
Exactly. They told me, don't wear your
right.
uniform.
Don't show that who you are because
Yep.
you know, and especially you got. And I'm not saying it because of California is any different than the other state, but they were more anti Vietnam than other, and they were so they. You coming back through California, you want to be quiet what you say. You don't get things
Well,
started.
and they had people at airports. They were
Right, they
there,
were sitting there for that.
ready
right.
to go. Yeah.
Did you, when you came home, did you, your first month or so, did anybody, like we were doing one of the interviews, and the guy said that him and his buddy wanted to go shooting bow and arrows, and his buddy was playing around and not even thinking about his friend from Vietnam, and he lit an M80 off, and the guy said, "Oh, I jumped 6 feet and crawled back under a hay bale," and did you ever have anything like? Did you have to get up and walk through? So a lot of guys said that they would get up at night and do like recon walks, or just you couldn't. Just
I
come
did.
up. Did you?
Yeah, but not so much for sound. I got up a lot of times to walk out the house and walk around and walk in dark corners and look around. And I still do that now, even today. But you know, it's something that you always have. When we were at the Hawaii, a car came by and made a kind of a backfire type.
Yep.
And I like to snatch her to the ground trying to get down at me, but that was instinct, hearing something that close to you and pop. And here it is, 50 some years later, and you just slow. I'm a whole lot slower about it.
Yep.
My muscles don't work the same, but I still try to get down.
Jimmy, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. I appreciated you then, and I appreciate you
Well,
now.
I do you too, John.
Thank you.
You're a lot of help to a lot of folks.
Thanks for supporting the Wolfhounds too.
Oh my.